I'm imagining that there's some sort of acoustic. Oh, you know what? I'll do the take on me thing. We'll start it.
Ooh, there you go.
I'm out of here.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is TheGamer.com's first Spoilercast. We're going to be talking about The Last of Us 2, and I'm here with two of my best friends on the editing team. My name is Eric. You might know me from the Pexham with the Legends podcast. And this is Sam and Bella. How you guys doing today?
Hello, fantastic.
Yeah, I'm doing great. I got a Hello Kitty. Doing good.
So we have all played the game. Obviously, we're going to be talking about the game in a spoilery way. This is our first time doing something like this, so we're just sort of feeling it out. But the one thing I can promise you is that whether you like the game or hated the game, by the end of this show, you're going to flip it. That's right. We are going to make you love or hate this game depending on how you feel right now.
I don't think that's how this works, Eric. I'm pretty sure.
All right, so let's ease into it. Give me one word that describes how you feel about The Last of Us 2, Sam.
One word. I guess I'll go with disappointed might be too strong of a word. But I'll go with that for now.
All right. Bella?
Conflicted.
Yeah,
conflicted.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to say satisfied.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean 10 out of 10. So, Sam, I read your review. Bella, I read your tweets. So I have a decent idea of how you all feel about it. But since Sam actually wrote the review, you want to give us sort of the broad strokes of we don't need to talk about the story. This is for people that played the game, but
sure.
But just kind of tell us how you felt at the end. What do you think about the whole thing?
Sure, and actually I'm going to kind of play off of your word, and I'll go with unsatisfied. That's probably a better word than disappointed. Overall, I enjoyed the game for what it was, but I think the biggest issue I had with it was that it just kind of felt like an extension of the same game from 2013, of just an extension of the original game. I thought it played really the same. The major moments were very impactful, very emotionally. I was emotionally invested in those moments, but it just really didn't seem like a huge step up from the original game for me. And that's kind of where I think the unsatisfied description kind of comes from.
Okay.
But like I said, I enjoyed playing through it, but we'll kind of get into the specifics of that.
We're kind of starting as broad as possible, and we'll get into like the more specific details. So, Belly, give us your sort of broad.
I really like the game in terms of what it's trying to do, what it tries to accomplish with its characters, with its world. I love the mechanics of this game, but I think it doesn't quite stick the landing on the nuances of a lot of the things it's trying to cover. And we'll get into the specifics of what that is, but I think its whole approach to political and religious extremism is interesting, but doesn't go as far as I want.
Mm-hmm.
I think the examination of trauma and grief is interesting, but it's not necessarily as insightful as I want. I think I really like this game, but I think I like what it's trying to be more than what it actually ultimately is.
Yeah. I want to echo stuff that both of you guys said. My biggest problem with the game, it isn't so much that it doesn't evolve the original. My single biggest problem with the game is that it is bloated. I think that it's probably 25 to 30% too long. And I think it's more indicative of like an industry-wide AAA problem than something I want to point directly at this game, because I feel like this more and more. And I think a lot of people are feeling like this more and more. And we have like recent comments from like a former Sony exec talking about how we need to rethink AAA and how we need to scale it back, scale the budgets back, scale the timeframes back. And I think that this is sort of a watershed moment for that, because this game is, for me, was beautiful and incredible and basically everything I wanted, except like a lot of it I fucking hated. Like in particular, when you're on the boat and you're taking the boat to the next stop and you got to get the gate open and then the next stop and get the gate open. And I've done that in so many games, like the Tomb Raider reboots, Uncharted in particular, like a lot of the like bloated Uncharted 4 stuff I totally felt in this game too. So that's my big thing though. Having said that, like, I was incredibly moved. Way more than I thought. I came into this super jaded, and that's something I want to talk about first before we get into this, into this, what we specifically think about parts of the game. I could not avoid having opinions about this game before I played it as much as I tried. Was that your experience too?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. Yeah. You know, the discourse leading up to this game was pretty noxious, and it felt like a lot of people on every potential side of the political spectrum arguing about something they knew jack shit about.
Right.
I won't cuss too much.
Yeah, sorry, I did it too. I did it too. My bad.
But yeah, so I think it was a lot of people arguing about the merits of something they hadn't experienced yet, which on the one hand is like online discourse in a nutshell. But on the other hand, it painted a certain picture of the game. And I certainly don't think that Neil Druckmann's statements or GameStop's advertising of that helped. I think they painted a very different picture of what this game actually was. So I think all the stuff leading up to it invited that sort of discourse. And I think a lot of it was ultimately very reductive. And I went in with a I went in expecting to hate this game. And I definitely don't. So I think that says a lot to how it was talked about and covered before it came out.
Sam, you pretty much put yourself in a bunker and sealed the door, right?
Yeah, I had I knew enough about the context of everything, of all the drama going on. I knew about the leaks, your first reviews, whatever, a week before I was able to play it. But yeah, I think I wanted to kind of put this in my review, but I didn't want to put words in our team's mouths. But it definitely felt like I was on the super excited, super stoked for this game, regardless of any sort of negative tones that were being directed at it, towards it, from it. And then the rest of the team wasn't so much, and then I feel like that's flipped. And that's one of the things that's blown my mind throughout all of this is I came into this super excited just from my experience with the first game,
right?
And it just that's how it fell flat for me. But then everyone else's minds kind of changed, and I feel like that's kind of just from what I've been seeing on Twitter, I feel like that's happened to a lot of people. Like they came in with one perspective and they left with a different one.
Yeah,
kind of like we're doing with the Spoilercast.
Yeah. Totally. well, the hype train is unstoppable. So if you played the first game, you already have impressions about the second one before you played it. That's unavoidable.
Sure.
But there was just the longest series of things that led up to this game that informed the discourse around it. Everything from Neil Druckmann's, in my opinion, super blowhardy interview where he talked about this thing as if it was the greatest work of art of all time.
Yeah.
So there was that. There was GameStop's thing, as you mentioned, about how horny you can get killing dogs, which was like super uncomfortable. It was like as you watch the light leave their eyes and their man's best friend, like it was super tragic. Okay, and then the crunch at Naughty Dog, that super informs how we feel about the game, and I want to talk more about that, obviously. But there was more. There was the leak, which caused this like wave of Gamergate backlash for social themes before anyone ever played the game.
Yeah.
And it went on and on. There was more drama after that. There was when the reviews came out, the embargoed reviewers could only talk about in non-specifics the first half of the game. Like you couldn't even talk about Abby. How could you review this game and not talk about half of the game?
Yeah.
Like the other character that you control for a good 12 hours of 20-something hour experience.
Yeah. So while that's going on, the most prolific game reviewers are all pontificating about this game and speaking in these like broad terms about how incredible and amazing it is. It's getting almost nothing but 10 out of 10 reviews. Somebody compares it to Schindler's List. Neil Druckmann gets involved with that discourse. It was just like nonstop. Like everything about this game was super tragic, super overblown. And by the time I got my hands on it, I too was like ready to totally hate it. I was like, I went into it thinking like, this is lowbrow pretending to be highbrow. They're going to try to force emotions on me. It's all going to be super transparent. And it wasn't. It really was not that. It felt real more than it didn't. It felt authentic more than it was forced to me. And almost all of the discourse around the game didn't land with me at all by the time I was done with the game. I was so confused about so much I had heard about this game by the time I finished it. And I still am, and that's kind of what I want to get into.
Yeah, I think the picture that was painted of this game and what it is very different than what it ultimately ended up being. I definitely went to this like you. I expected it to be trying to shock me at every turn. I expected a very ham-fisted like handling of any social themes in the game. And certainly there are some elements of the story where I do think it's ham-fisted. But I think the conversation around what this game actually is not accurate, because what this game is a very dour, bleak meditation on the cycle of abuse. That's what this game is about. That's what it is. And I think that nobody's really talking about it in those terms. I think that people are talking about it in terms of, Joel died, I'm sad,
Right.
I don't think anyone wants to talk about the actual themes of the game. And so, yeah, I would agree with that. I would say the conversations leading up to the game are not indicative of what the game actually is.
Yeah. Boy, a lot of different directions I want to go with this, but since you mentioned Joel, let's stick to that point for a bit. So Joel dies in what is essentially the tutorial of this game. Like it concludes the prologue.
Yeah.
Right. And that was not totally unexpected to me. No. Even being a person that would manage to avoid the spoilers, like, if you had asked me at the second I finished The Last of Us 1, what's going to happen in The Last of Us 2, I would have told you, well, obviously Joel's going to die. Yeah. But that story beat is the most devastating thing to ever happen to gamers. Right?
It was.
How did you guys feel about it?
You go first, Sam.
Sure. There was I agree. Like, I totally expected that to happen, but when it did, there was the audible gasp. There was the lean back and grab my face. And I think I was streaming at the time. And like, I couldn't believe it, even though I knew it was going to happen. It was, the impact of it was like the way they did it. Like, it was great.
Yeah. So I read and watched most of this game before it came out, because like there were videos and stuff up for like a few hours, and I watched those. So I knew that Joel was going to get beaten with a golf club. In fact, I tried to use one of those as a header image for the website at one point just to make people upset. I did.
Yeah, that's right.
Terrible.
I did, yeah, I would echo what Sam said. I don't know if it felt as much of a gut punch to me. I went into this game not liking Joel, and I actually like Joel a lot more as a character now, not as a person. But it didn't shock me, but the way they did it was very effective. I definitely sat and flinched as Ellie was just kind of forced to watch him just get beaten to death. It was really painful. It was really just heartbreaking to watch her react, much more than it was him dying for me. Because that was her, despite all of his warts, despite all of the bad lessons that he'd instilled in her in some degree, which this game sort of confronts, that was her world. That was her father for all intents and purposes. And you really see that pain in the way she reacts. And that was really, really hard to watch for sure.
Ellie's relationship with Joel's death is the driving force of the entire game. And I felt like I was exploring that through Ellie through the whole game, and it took me until the very last scene to really come to terms with what his death meant for her. And I think that if I had to sort of articulate my interpretation, which is a good thing to do when you're doing a podcast, Ellie lost her purpose when Joel saved her. She says that pretty specifically. My life was supposed to mean something. I was supposed to die in that hospital. And I think that when Joel took that away from her and she lost her purpose, then her life became about being Joel's sacrifice. That her identity was Joel's. I don't think sacrifice is even specifically the best word, but the way she sees herself as belonging to Joel, and I think when Joel dies, it's a lot more than just losing her father. It's also re-experiencing that trauma of losing her purpose, of once again feeling like there's no reason for her to exist, and going on this brutally savage revenge mission is her choosing a new purpose, a new reason to live.
And
go ahead.
I think what that does on a metatextual level is interesting too, because I think a lot of the discussions around the first Last of Us talked about Ellie, and which is weird because you play as her for half the game, but in the first game, people talk about her as if like she's your virtual daughter, she's your virtual sidekick. And so a lot of players of this game that I've talked to personally perceive her role as a character to just sort of be subordinate to Joel. And so the game engages with that on a very meta level, in that at first you're just kind of scrambling, what the fuck is Ellie even about? Why is she here? What is her drive? And for most of the game, that drive is to murder the living heck out of everybody. And as she continues to do that, and as the players are confronted with the kind of brutality of their actions, you start to see her learn a new purpose for herself. And I think the player who might have perceived Ellie as a sidekick now has a different perception of her, now has a different perception of what she's learned and what she's about. And I think that's a really good way the narrative and gameplay reflects like the themes of the game.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with both everything that you both said. And I think that's part of the story issue that I have. And I don't know if we want to get to the end. I guess not really.
Yeah,
the end,
let's work our way there, because that's such a big. I know I kind of touched on it, but did y'all know that there was 2 Last of Us subreddits? There's a Last of Us subreddit where people talk about the game and make fan art and show their support, and then there's a Last of Us 2 subreddit where the toxic garbage of humanity exists. You're
gonna post this there, right?
I have tried very hard after finishing the game to seek out all of the good faith negativity around the game, because there's a lot of bad actors that don't like this game. Let's just put it that way.
Seriously?
There's a lot of people that don't like this game that also don't like women.
Oh shit.
Gay people.
Oh no.
Yeah. Shocker.
Shocker.
But I'm not naive. Like I'm not out here saying like, if you don't like this game, you're a bigot. That's ridiculous.
No, of course not.
So having said that, it's been very difficult to find the good faith detractors for this game, because when, just like with Gamergate and the way that they hid behind like honest journalism to be hateful, a lot of people use bad faith arguments to be hateful about this game.
Right. No, totally.
So what are legitimate, and I think I have seen some, but what are like legitimate problems that people have with Joel dying or the way Joel dying that's bigger than like, he's my favorite character and you killed him?
I'm gonna snap this disc on stream. Y'all see that?
You killed Joel and I love Joel. What
What are
the problems that people have with this?
With Joel dying,
with Joel dying.
I've seen people say something that I agree with in that it happens really, really early on. And so you kind of feel, and I haven't played Last of Us since I played it at launch in 2013. So I needed more time, I felt, to get acclimated to Joel before they just like yeeted him off of the mortal coil. And of course, the way the game progresses, I understood why they killed him up front, because then the game gives you a lot of other like flashbacks with him. But I certainly think I've seen critiques of you just kill him right away. And that's kind of where I sit too. This was the protagonist of your last game. And while I'm not upset about it, I certainly think that's a cheaply shocking narrative decision to make.
A lot of people say something to the effect of, it's not that he died, it's the way he died. That they're upset that he would reveal his name to these strangers, that it's so out of character. A lot of criticisms about this game are about how people act out of character.
That's always what it is.
Yeah. Which is absurd. That's basically along the lines of the story isn't what I wanted it to be. Right. Yeah. So, they walked into that room, and as I recall, Tommy said his name first, which makes sense. Tommy's a little bit more maybe naive. Tommy seems a little bit, maybe he's not as sharp as Joel. Yeah. That's sort of my impression. Yeah. And I think it's very clear. You can see on Joel's face that he knows what's going on here. But it's too late. They got chased by zombies all the way there. Like, what was he supposed to do?
And I think that the out of character complaint is one I don't agree with at all, because like the most in character thing for Joel to do would be to help somebody and die doing it.
Of course.
I think that's who he is as a character, in spite of all of his flaws, is like he didn't know this stranger who was around Ellie's age approximately, and he was probably like, oh shit, I gotta help. I gotta help her. And that kills him in the end. His own attempt to save somebody is what kills him. And if you don't think that's in Joel's character, I don't know if we played the same first game.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? Like, the first game, you play as Sarah, his daughter, and she dies pretty much immediately.
Yeah.
What else could they have done in this sequel that would have, elevated that death, I don't know how you could draw people in with that emotional element that this franchise is known for, with anything other than a major character, be it Ellie, be it Joel, dying kind of early on, and kind of basing the rest of the game sort of around that entire, incident.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It speaks to like that narrative, expect that things will escalate, right?
Right.
Things have to escalate in a sequel, and that's a really good point. But Bella, something that you said about players not understanding Joel's character, I think that answers a lot of questions that I have about the negativity around this game, and people's insistence that the game should have been about. I saw a petition yesterday
Oh my God.
to redo the story of The Last of Us 2. And I think that, and this gets into a much bigger social issue than we're prepared to tackle on this video game podcast. But the rampant misunderstanding of Joel as a deeply flawed person speaks to very widespread toxic masculinity in our society, and particularly in our gaming society. Right. That people look up to Joel so much that their entire The Last of Us 2 experience is ruined because he was killed, because he was killed by a woman, but because he was killed unceremoniously and wasn't given a hero's death, and it seems to me like the people that are the people that are still sending me DMs for defending the game just because of anything I wrote about it. Like, if you're that angry and upset about Joel dying, then you don't get this game at all. Like, you don't get the series. You completely misunderstood the first one.
Also, like, I will say, like, you mentioned the idea of a hero's death, and I've seen people mention this before, is that the point of The Last of Us 2 in particular is that there are no heroes to the story. That's the game handles that with the subtlety of hitting you with a hammer.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
But yeah, it literally is just like no one in this game is good, and I think that's kind of the point.
Yeah. So I think maybe we need to be like overt about this. Like, we've been talking about Joel's flaws and stuff, but like, Joel's a bad dude. Like, he loves Ellie more than anything, but the choices that he makes and the way that he treats her is incredibly possessive. It is
That's a good point.
is incredibly abusive towards her. It is a very selfish love.
Yeah.
And I think selfish is probably like his biggest character flaw, and if you had to describe Joel in one word, to me it would be selfish. Sam just went all blurry on me. He didn't like what I was saying.
That's the ether.
Get it?
No, but yeah, Sam, I'll let you. Oh, Sam just disappeared. Sam, I'll let you address.
No, go ahead, Bella. I'll figure this
out. Like, Joel does bad things. Joel does some things that are very, very, like, indicative of abuse. His initial reason for taking care of Ellie is his own personal redemption quest, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think what the game wants us to grapple with is whether or not Joel is entirely good or entirely bad, which sort of gets into the blasé approach to gray morality this game has. But I don't know if I would personally characterize Joel as a bad person. I would characterize him as a broken person who inflicts his trauma on everyone around him.
Absolutely.
Albeit accidentally or intentionally. I think he tries to do good, but I don't think he ever stops and questions why he's trying to do good.
Right.
And so whether or not that makes him a good or bad person is kind of up for debate. But I certainly hear what you're saying, and I definitely think that his treatment of Ellie, especially when she's a teenager, is very possessive, for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with 100% with that. And I don't necessarily know if I think one way or the other about Joel, but I think just in hearing, this conversation, that's 100% what happened with Ellie throughout this game. She was motivated by her own, redemption, which, I mean, is ultimately a selfish reason, which, is one of the things that I was most upset about in terms of her character overall. Like, I get it, but I was just very disappointed in the direction that she took, because it was the same as Joel in that regard.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Totally.
Like the cycle of violence, right? Like, that's definitely one of the bigger themes here. And yeah, Bella, you're totally right. Like, the game is very overt about throwing away our concepts of morality. So, like, calling Joel a bad dude is definitely reductive. Joel is a selfish dude, and the staunchest defenders of Joel maybe need to look at their own toxic masculinity. Absolutely. I think that's sort of my point, and their own, like, nice guy behavior. Yeah.
It's like if your takeaway, it's like people who talk about God of War. If your takeaway from God of War is that Kratos is just a good dad trying to do his best, that's not the good takeaway. The takeaway from God of War is he's a bad dad for that first half of that game, and then he's like, oh God, I suck. Yeah. And then the rest of the game is him learning to grapple with that, and by the end you start seeing some sort of reconciliation with him and Atreus. And I think that's the same situation here. It's like, I don't think that Joel is a good dad, and I think on some level he knows that, but I think that some good comes out of his parenting. It's like real parents almost.
Yeah. And one of the game's strengths is the way that it manages to constantly walk the line, and keep most of its themes, especially when it comes to, like, characterization and relationships, a little bit more subdued. A lot of its themes obviously are not very subdued, but when it comes to I think relationships and identity, I think the game manages to feel very authentic to me, and not feel like it's forcing. I would say, like, I think more than more than morality, what the game succeeds at breaking down is identity.
Yeah.
I think that's something that it does very successfully. So
that's really an interesting way to frame the game. I would agree with that, actually. It grapples with identity of all different types. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
So let's get into that a little bit more, because when we talk about identity, we have to talk about, you know, the player character, and that's another big point of contention for this game. We start as Joel dies. We play as Ellie. We think we're going to continue. Well, before Joel dies, we do play as Abby, sort of,
Right.
for minutes here and there, and we're going back and forth. Boy, I love Abby.
I love Abby so much.
Sorry,
I couldn't. About her later. I love her. She's so good.
I couldn't hold it in. I really love Abby, and man, people hate Abby so much. But okay, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Okay. So for the next, I don't know, 15 hours, we are on a singular warpath with Ellie. We go to Seattle, and we're picking off the wolves one by one to get revenge for Joel, under the guise that we're chasing Tommy, which is something I actually really appreciated. Was even Dena believes that we're there to recover Tommy. We're not. Obviously, we're not. You know, Ellie makes that really clear. But I liked that level of complication, because I've seen a lot of, you know, this is the same revenge story that we've seen 1,000 times, and I don't really feel that way about it. The narrative arc, I don't think, was anything cliche or overly familiar to me.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Do you have anything else to say about that, Sam? Sorry.
Not really. No, like I think that's too easy of a criticism to, you know, put out there, because I definitely didn't feel that way at all.
Yeah, I feel like I'm very worn on the idea of like the gritty introspective revenge thriller. Like, example, I fucking hate Logan. I don't like that movie. I think it's bad. I don't like movies that try to have this gritty, myopic approach to like revenge is bad, but sometimes you gotta do it. And I don't think that's what this game is trying to do.
No,
I think what this game is doing, especially when we talk about the ending, I think what this game is trying to do is put the player in a position where you understand where Ellie's coming from, and I think to a degree you start to sympathize with her, and the game even starts giving you tools that let you revel in the violence that she's enacting on people in the name of revenge. And by the time you get to the halfway point of the game, which we'll talk about a little later, you realize that they're basically baiting the player. They're baiting you into having a good time murdering people, because then they flip the switch and are like, hey, don't you feel bad now? And honestly, yeah, I kind of did. So yeah, I definitely don't think that this is a very typical revenge thriller. I actually think it undoes a lot of my typical criticisms of the gritty, grounded revenge drama.
Yeah. And I think if we're going to like pigeonhole it and be genre specific about it, I think we tend to ignore the fact that it's a horror game and a horror story first, over everything. So I'm bypassing some really important stuff, obviously, because we have some Joel flashbacks that I thought were beautiful, especially the museum. I think that was one of my favorite sequences in the whole game. But I want to get to that big subversion when at the halfway point, Ellie and Abby are face to face, and we leave Ellie and play the rest of the game as Abby. And boy, people sure are mad about that.
I don't like follow actively a lot of gaming subreddits, but I get like push notifications on my phone that are like, this is trending in this gaming subreddit. I'm like, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
But I saw this meme that was like about Abby being an unrelatable or like a bad character, an unlikable character. And I really think that speaks to the reductive discourse surrounding this game, because if your takeaway from this game is that Ellie is likable and Abby is not, then like you're missing the entire point. The entire point of the game is that both of them are the same, just different.
Yeah. I will admit that when at that point when you take over Abby and I spent hours playing Abby and I realized that it was going to be the rest of the game, I was exhausted. And
Yeah.
that's not narrative reasons. That's because the game is way too long.
Yes.
Like
For sure.
the game should have been 6 hours with Ellie, 6 hour, like it's just so much. Go clear this room. Go, oh, we got to go around another way. The game.
Indulgent. It's very indulgent.
But that also I think
good word.
maybe kind of speaks to our age a little bit, because I never felt that way when I was a kid. Games could go on for forever. I didn't bother me,
Right. It's funny because when we took over as Abby, I admittedly did not put as much time as I probably should have into, her abilities, her any of that stuff. And so like I'm like halfway through the second, part of the game. And then I start building her up, and I'm like, oh, you know what? This was stupid of me. I'm glutton for punishment, I guess. But I would totally agree with the just go. You know what we need to go do? We need to go find this thing. You know where it is? On the other side, a million miles away. Like, oh my God, I get it. Like by the time that fifth one came, you're like, I know what I have to do. We don't have to talk about it. Like, let's just do it.
Yeah, and like I think that Abby's half of the game mechanically is certainly more action heavy. Like it certainly gives you more heavy weaponry. Like you get a fucking flamethrower,
right?
Yeah.
But like I absolutely agree with you, Sam. Like by the time I was like 3/4 of the way through this game, I was kind of like, okay, Abby, you're moving too slow. The narrative is being drip fed to me. I don't want to have to go do another fetch quest. I don't want to have to go there and back again. I want this narrative to be resolved, and I don't want it to be resolved in 30 hours. Here we are. And so, I think bloat is a lot of this game's problem. And it's not traditional AAA open world bloat. It's just padding. It's a walking simulator without any of the brisk pacing that makes walking simulators work.
The like graph of my engagement while I was playing this game is all over the place. It was just like, but as I got closer to the end, I liked it more than I ever had. Like towards the end of the game, I was really loving it. There was just a lot of parts that were just very dull. But pretty much from teaming up with Lev until the end of the game, I was having a blast. I loved fighting the scars with him. I didn't want to use the pejorative term. Isn't that weird? I was trying to think of what do we call it? What are the scars called themselves? I wanted to call them what they call themselves. I actually felt bad using the pejorative term there. But I loved fighting through them with Lev. I loved the skyscraper and descending down that thing. I thought like all of that was super intense. Even going back to the hospital was cool, but as tired as I was bouncing back and forth with Abby, we got to go to the aquarium. We got to go back here. We got to go back to the aquarium. We got to go. I sort of realized, it took me a long time to realize what Abby's motivation was. People keep asking her, Owen in particular asked her, why are you doing all this? You've thrown your life away for the enemy. You're killing yourself, and I think for me, the way that I finally understood at the end, and I was curious what you guys thought about Abby's motivations too. Her whole life was getting Joel. I think we have to keep that in mind. Like just like Ellie's purpose, what does Abby do once Joel's dead? Who is Abby without the lust for revenge? Yeah. And I think that giving herself over to this mission to prove that she's a good person, to help this kid and turn her back on her own family, her own leadership, her own training, to prove that she can do something good, is her own sort of redemption arc for killing Joel. And none of the wolves will show any remorse for what they did for Joel. That would be an impossible thing to face, for them to admit that there was something wrong with what they did. But the way that they show that remorse and seek their own redemption for Abby is by killing her own, obviously I'm jumping to the end here, but killing her own leader, turning her back on her family, and giving everything up to help this kid she just met, who is one of the enemies.
Yeah.
Is that Was that how you took it? Is that how it's meant to be taken?
I think so. I mean, it all goes back to her dad, right? Like, when you're in the dark, you look for the light, and she was clearly in a dark place. And then, when she killed Joel, she did her thing. It's like you said, now what? And I think, just as we saw over time, she realized, like, you know what? Maybe some of the stuff that I'm doing is very wrong.
Mhm.
And what can I do to be that light that my father raised me to be, to see, in myself and other people. So I think you're spot on.
Yeah, I think that meeting and helping Lev gives Abby a purpose, and
Absolutely.
I think you see this conflict not only in just like who do I kill, where do I go. Like you see, there's one moment I really liked in the game where you saw all those body bags coming into where Abby's encampment was, and you realize, oh, shit's really bad for her too, and
Yeah.
like a lot of the devastation, a lot of the death on her end comes from what the players are doing in the first half of the game, which is like a really good way to make you grapple with your own actions. But I think not only a lack of purpose is driving Abby, but I think a sort of palpable self-hatred. Like you see her. There's one particularly effective scene where she and Owen fuck in that van, and like you can tell when they're doing it, she's like
In the boat?
she's in the boat, yeah.
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 Yeah, boat van. It was a vehicle of some
Sort of a
sort. But
boat van?
boat van, yeah. But like you see this look in her eyes that even when she is like agreeing to doing what she's doing, it's consensual. You see this look where she just hates it. She hates herself for letting this happen again. For like being just with Owen again. And I think as, 20, 30 somethings, we can probably all say we've had that encounter where we look at it and we're like, fuck. I shouldn't have done that. I really don't like myself for that. And I think this game actually really accurately captures what that's like. Because maybe that's the wrong takeaway. Maybe I'm supposed to like Owen, but like I hated that.
I don't think no.
It sucks.
I
So
honestly, I hate to say this, but it's like I think he's a punchable face guy is his biggest problem.
He is, absolutely. He just has that face.
But what I think sort of puts a bow on the point I wanted to make about Abby was what she does in the end is to follow Owen's quest to find the Fireflies, right? I think that because Abby finished her mission and killed Joel and fulfilled her purpose, that through what we see in her story through the rest of the game is essentially living for other people. Owen's in trouble, she's going for Owen. Lev's in trouble, she's helping Lev. When Owen dies, her life becomes fulfilling Owen's last wish, as detrimental as that ended up being. There's another point I wanted to make, but I forgot, and so we'll move on. Let's talk a little bit about Lev and his sister, because I think that this is another sticking point for Nasty Lads. But also
nasty lads.
For nasty lads, but also for people that have some genuine criticism. And I am at a bit of a loss here because I guess my privilege didn't really allow me to see anything that was wrong with Lev's character, but I definitely want to hear some other perspectives.
Both of y'all look at the trans person on the call.
Hit us with it.
No, seriously. I have a lot of complicated feelings about Lev. I think Lev as a character is very well done. I think he's a very interesting, likable character. I think the way that the game tries to endear you to his struggle is admirable. I also think it goes very much down the route of trans suffering porn, which I feel like a lot of depictions of trans people do. It's like, God, look how terrible it is being trans. Like, yes, that is true. It does suck. But it's also good sometimes. And while I think this game mostly weaves a good, like, that weaves a balance. That's not a saying. It balances the tragedy porn with Lev, who Lev is as a small lad, who is just a very plucky, resourceful little dude.
Yeah.
I think that the amount of suffering that they show him going through comes across as, for straight people, it started to go like, look how bad this is. It's like, yeah, it is bad. There's other ways you could have shown this. And I also do think that I understand its realism. I think dead naming him sucked. I think them calling him by his birth name sucked. I don't think they should have done that. And I think, and maybe that's the point. As a trans player, that made me super angry. I was like, well, I want to kill all these fuckers now.
Yeah.
But I certainly felt like it was an exploitative, cheap tactic to show you what he'd been through. So I think him as a character is interesting. I think the world that surrounds him and the cruelty that surrounds him could have been handled better, I guess.
Okay.
What were your thoughts on Yara?
Yara was like so complicated as a character because like on the one hand she obviously cared for Lev, but on the other hand would use terms such as like, if I recall correctly, like stop playing pretend or playing make-believe or something like that. Like Yara was obviously supportive, but I felt that ultimately was kind of one of those family members who supports you while also not necessarily understanding. And in the apocalypse, you know, maybe that's all you got, and like I see the validity in that. But it certainly came across as, I don't know if I particularly liked Yara, but I don't know if I particularly hated Yara either.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, because I you know, I don't have a problem with Lev. I don't, you know, I can't obviously speak to the experience
Sure.
of Lev, but I was happy that they gave us Yara as that sort of, not necessarily supporter, but like that was
like a bridge.
yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say, but like there was still that relationship that meant a lot to both of them. And you know, I think speaking to the apocalyptic, like this is what you get, like that definitely plays a part. But I think I liked that relationship.
And I certainly am a big proponent. Some people think that showing any display of like misunderstanding or bigotry is bad in media. I don't think that's true. I think that Yara as a character serves that role really well because I believe in the power of media transforming people and changing minds. And Yara, in a way, is there for players who might be a bit bigoted themselves or maybe like not bigoted but don't understand. Yara is there as that analog. And now, while you could discuss the validity of that analog, I think for somebody who doesn't necessarily understand trans people, to see Yara still trying could probably motivate them in their daily lives to also try. And so I think that speaks to her role in the game, and why it is ultimately valid, even if I have issues with it. Yeah.
Cool.
Anyway, Lev is good. The way the game handles Lev isn't always great, but I think that having a trans character in your AAA game is cool, and I would like more people to do that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Does Lev suffer more than our protagonists?
Not really. They all basically
It's kind of a
really
nightmare
over
for everyone.
Right.
It's really bad for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And I hope, I guess I just hope that it is more normalized because of something as big as The Last of Us, right? That's sort of the goal, is like
Totally.
that we can include more diverse cast of characters in big games. That's, at the end of the day, if that's what we get, like, then good, like they did a good job.
Yeah, like
Right?
I think the winning formula here is more representation, people pushing back against the good and bad aspects of representation, and media growing from that.
Yeah.
Some people, I think, would argue that if you're buying a game, you're complicit in that bad characterization, you're complicit in the bad things. And I don't necessarily agree with that. So yeah, I think it's a good thing that they did, and I think we can't have this conversation without also talking about Dena and Ellie's relationship, because this is like, unless you count Life is Strange, which is really more of a AA game, this is like the first major AAA game I can think of that makes you play as a queer woman.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Okay, so here is my hot take on Dema and Ellie. That particular relationship, because although we know that they have known each other for years, because we met Dema at the start of this game, that the progression of that relationship felt like the most busted thing in this game. Once they were together, I was on board and it worked. But getting from first kiss to now we're in love was super busted.
Yeah, I would agree with that. From I guess through the theater, I was not a fan of Dena at all.
Really?
Like it felt forced. And I mean, if you're gonna give me that sidekick character who's supposedly supposed to be helping me, I'm gonna call out every single time, hey, there's someone over here, you want to shoot them? I don't know. But that goes, that's just like, the sidekick character, not Dena herself. But by the end of the game, she was my absolute favorite person in the game. So
I think that the relationship, the speed of it, is less indicative of this game, and I'm not gonna say the hottest take and say that's indicative of AAA gaming entirely, because AAA games don't know how to fucking write relationships. But I will just focus in and say that that's how I feel about Naughty Dog's writing of relationships in general. Like Elena and Nathan Drake's relationship in Uncharted is terrible. I don't like it. It grows out of seemingly nowhere, and Nathan Drake gives her every single reason in the world to be like, I'm done with you. You kind of suck. And yet the game wants us to keep buying into like, no, they really have a good dynamic. They're really cute. And that's kind of how I feel. I see, and I understand the thirst for representation, right? But I see a lot of discourse around The Last of Us Part 2 of this game is so great because they're gay, and that's so positive. And I'm like, no, Ellie's kind of an abusive partner. She's like a very emotionally distant, cold partner who you wouldn't want to date. I don't think their dynamic is cute. I don't think it's supposed to be.
No, I don't either.
I think you're supposed to see it slowly take a toll on Dena. And spoiler alert, the literal ending of the game shows that that's exactly what the point is. That Ellie has driven away who she loves.
Right. Who is probably, I mean, murdering lots of people aside, because that's what everyone in this world does.
Right.
She's probably the most scrupulous person in this game, like the most strong, held fast to her own values. And like, I think Dena is one of the stronger characters in the game.
I would agree with that completely.
And okay, so can we talk about pregnant people? I want to talk about pregnant people.
Woo! This game hates them.
So early on, when I was feeling pretty manipulated by this game, because this game wore me down over time, I almost feel like it's a little bit of a Stockholm situation. The longer this game went on, the more I loved it. But early on, when I was feeling manipulated because of all of the buildup and all of the Neil Druckmann talking about how it's going to change my life and make me feel like I'm evil or what? Okay. So I was like, oh, they're making us play the bad guys, so we know that there's no bad guys. I get it. Everything was like, I get it. Oh, here's the pregnant character. I get it. There's two pregnant characters, and there's one on either side of the conflict. Yeah. And I think that when it is ultimately used in the Abby Ellie fight, that worked. A lot of people think it didn't work at all and was like the worst. But what do you guys think about all the pregnant people?
Like what aspect didn't work? Just what happened to Mel in particular? Or?
No, I think that the meme I keep seeing, the hate I keep seeing is like that Abby is not only unlikable but unredeemable because of the moment when Ellie was like, she's pregnant, and then Abby was like, good, and was about to do it if Lev hadn't stopped her. That's like a story moment that people are point to and go, this is why Abby's a bad character.
But like Ellie already stabbed.
But she didn't know.
A pregnant woman already.
This is not my words. I'm not an idiot.
I know.
But Ellie didn't know she was pregnant. So that's why
it still sucks.
It still sucks.
No, yeah, I think that's a weird critique to have, because I think the reveal of Mel's pregnancy is really it's actually super well done.
Yeah.
In that the entire first half of the game is depersonalizing who you're killing. Like, I fucking loved murdering people in the first half of the game. It was so fun. It felt great. And then that moment when Ellie realizes that Mel is pregnant, it made me go like, oh, wait a second. who have I been killing? And then when you play as Abby, you actually meet the NPCs that you killed as Ellie. And so I think that just because Abby knows that Dena is pregnant and her saying good does not make her unlikable. I think that makes her somebody who has watched all of her friends and loved ones get killed, and she's angry, just like Ellie. That's the point of the game.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, couldn't that also just have been the turning point for Abby herself? Like, you can still be redeemable for not going through with something. I mean, if that one situation moves you into a better place as a person, Lev was the one who saved Abby in that regard. And it's just that critique is, I don't understand it.
I don't either.
I don't want to speak for Sam, but I think that both of us were pretty turned off by the pregnant lady jumping up on shelves and climbing all around.
Oh my God.
That was a little... I
was going nuts.
Especially as someone who is recently married to a pregnant person. That's a weird way to say Sam has a baby.
That's recently married to a pregnant person.
Yeah.
That's like small boulder the size of a large boulder type descriptor there.
Yeah, just imagining, just like watching that woman like swing on ropes and climb over stuff. I was like, what the hell is this? There's no way.
Kept thinking, like, just stay there. I'll be back.
Yeah. It's fine. She climbed up on the roof.
Sit down for a second.
Like Wolfenstein 2 handled pregnancy better in that, like, Anya was pregnant in that game and she did a whole lot of cool murder, but the game also was like, hey, here's some actual physical limitations she has. It doesn't mean she can't get topless and kill Nazis, but she also needs to, like, maybe do that a little slower. And I don't know if Neil Druckmann has ever met a pregnant person. I don't know if he knows what pregnancy actually is as a
concept. That was, of all the heads I bashed in and necks I stabbed, like, watching that pregnant lady climb up on that shelf was the most taxing part of this game.
For sure.
I do want to. I am interested though. Like we've all mentioned this and sidestepped around like talking about Abby as a character and what we think about her. But like, what do we feel about Abby? How do we like her?
Yeah,
I'll go after y'all.
Okay. So as far as like what you would call like the characterization, which is just like the moment to moment, the in-game interactions and like the quips and the way that she expresses herself, I like, it was so much fun to play as Abby, and it was so much fun to fight as Abby. Like it as limited as the actual playable difference is between the characters. Obviously they have slightly different guns and
different skill trees.
Yes, they do have different skill trees, but playing as Abby feels so much different just by virtue of like the animations and her size, and like even if their stats are the same, it felt a lot more fun to play as Abby. So I liked that. I really liked her arc, which we have talked about, and her own sense of redemption and also like her failures, just like everyone else. So yes, I'm totally on board with Abby in the end. That's what I think. Sam?
Yeah, I would agree with that. We were talking about Ellie's taking on Joel's sort of characteristics of being a selfish person who was motivated by their own interests, whereas I think Abby eventually became the opposite, and was more, invested in the well-being of Lev, in not necessarily letting people like live and let live, or die and let die, I guess, in this game. But there was just a stark difference, I think, in their character progression. And if I were to have been able to choose who to end the game with, it for sure would have been Abby.
Yeah, I loved Abby. I thought she was great. But to put it in more complicated terms, when Metal Gear Solid 2 came out, you played for Solid Snake as the first 2 or 3 hours of that game, or first hour if you sped through it, and then they made you play as Raiden, and everyone was like, who the fuck is this?
Yeah.
I don't like this dude. He's not my smoking daddy. I don't care. And then in the decade after that game came out, you saw more and more people have retroactive, like, oh, playing as Raiden made me understand the world of the game differently.
Right.
And like gamers slowly having a hive mind of maybe Raiden was good. And I feel like that's what's probably, hopefully, going to happen with Abby. Because for me, when I took control of her, in the first few hours, like, oh, I get it. Playing as Abby is supposed to make me reflect on my choices as Ellie. I get it.
Yeah.
But I have been shocked at the idea that she is even remotely more unlikable than Ellie, because I think they both have done truly atrocious things. In a way, Ellie has actually done more atrocious things, IMO. That's a whole other topic. I like Abby. I liked her characterization. I liked how gruff she was compared to Ellie. I liked her kind of headstrong approach to things. I liked how she was a lot more, I guess, soft-spoken. She felt like a different character, and that reflected in the way she controlled. Like, you see her upbringing with the Western Liberation Front, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Washington.
Yeah.
Washington, thank you. The Washington Liberation Front, you see that upbringing reflected not only in the way she talks to people, not only in her like manner of speaking and how she interacts with people. You see that in those mechanics. She is heavier a little bit. Her methods of stealth killing are a lot slower and more built around her choking someone out. She feels different in both the narrative and in the mechanics. And I think that's a really good way of showing that she is incredibly different than Ellie, despite a lot of the commonalities that they have together.
Yeah.
Also, her arms were fucking huge, and I love it.
She's so jacked.
She's so jacked. I love it.
I would love her to choke me out.
What?
Nothing.
I think that's a different podcast, Eric. Moving on.
So
same though.
Yeah. So I think that the what feels overwhelmingly negative about Abby and like this sort of debate of Abby versus Ellie, it all comes back to Joel and identifying as Joel, and Ellie is your daughter, and I am Joel, and I'm the hero of the story, and who is this bitch? Like that's
that's how it feels, though.
That's it. I really hate like, obviously none of those people are here to defend themselves. And I can just say whatever I want because this is my show. But that's what I think. That's what I think about it. Anyone who played this game and, you know, gave their time to it, gave themselves to it, tried to enjoy it because they spent $60 on it, and came out the other side saying like nobody cares about Abby. Like I saw Angry Joe shouting, nobody cares about Abby. It's like, if you don't care about Abby by the end of this game, you have to look at you got to look at yourself. This isn't the story's fault. This ain't Naughty Dog's fault. You closed your heart. That's what this is.
Yeah.
Because she is just as realized and nuanced and likable and hateable and everything else as Joel is, as Ellie is.
As every major character in this game is, except for perhaps Lev, who is like probably the only innocent character.
So pure, and obviously Owen is hateable. That's been established.
Owen is a fuckboy.
I think JJ is the most innocent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, but it. You know, for me, like I said earlier, like the biggest theme, I've been saying biggest a lot in this show. It's not normal for me. The
biggest file size is the PS4 game. It's not even true.
My most significant takeaway in terms of themes is about identity, the breakdown of that identity. And I think that's something that Bella said before I started rambling about meeting and getting to know the characters that we've already killed, and this idea of sort of walking with ghosts throughout this game is a big part of that identity theme for me, and something that I was the most taken aback by was spending so much of the game with dead people. I thought that was really powerful.
Totally.
I want to know if that said something to you guys too.
Yeah. No, I think the idea of like at first I did feel that killing Joel up front was like kind of hacking storytelling for shock value.
Yeah.
But I think having him be dead makes those parts of the museum or any other flashbacks with him hit different. I think they made me go like, wow, you're seeing these very formative moments on Ellie's life or in Abby's life with people that have died that she's been with. You're seeing how formative these people are with the knowledge that they're not there anymore to guide this character. And I think that makes their presence even more haunting. And so I think that is actually a very effective narrative decision, personally.
Yeah, and I think what you were saying in terms of breaking these identities down, I think another theme was just the rebuilding or not rebuilding of those identities, without these people. Obviously, we saw the rebuilding with Abby more so than we did with Ellie, and I guess I I wasn't as struck with the flashbacks as I was hoping I would be. Those just didn't. I understood, why they were doing it. I understood why we were going through it. They just didn't hit for me, and I'm
Sure.
not. I've actually been trying to figure out why that was the case, and I just can't figure it out. Maybe it was just the fact that the game was already so long at that point. But
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
a bit
because
I like them, but they're slow.
there's a lot of them. There's a
Yeah.
surprising amount of flashbacks.
Yeah. Well, even
Um,
just sort of the dreamy, repeated Abby finding her dead dad. We do that 3
right.
or 4 times, I
Yeah.
think.
Right. Yeah.
Which, on a narrative level is really ingenious because they're mechanically making the player relive something that she has been reliving in her head for years and
Mhm.
years and years.
Yeah.
But in terms of player satisfaction, that's not very fun.
Right. It's like
Well,
you
and
don't want to walk down the hallway, which is
It's
right.
like
the point, but it's a video game. You should
I
want
don't
to do
know.
everything you do.
Right. Like I don't know if y'all have ever played the Suda 51 game, Flower, Sun, and Rain.
Mm-mm.
I've played wait, is that one
What?
title? I played a game called Flower. Is that what you're talking about?
No.
Okay, okay.
So there's this part of the game. It's a murder mystery. You have to walk up and down this entire stretch of the island a few times, right? And it gets to be really exhausting. And as I was playing it, I was like, "Why am I doing this? This is really boring." And then I talked to an NPC, and the NPC was like, "Boy, it sure is boring having you do this. If this was a game, it would really not be a very fun one to play." And made me realize in the moment, oh, this isn't supposed to be fun. And it still sucked, but I appreciated what they were trying to do. And I think this is a lesser extent of that. I
Yeah.
appreciate what they're trying to do by making you kind of go through these slow segments, and I do like them ultimately. I appreciate them making you relive Abby's hospital trauma repeatedly in terms of what they do for like cognitive processing of the plot, but I don't think on a mechanical level they're very satisfying.
That's a good point.
Especially considering like how mechanically satisfying the rest of this game is.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And
Sorry.
I will say that the one flashback that did stick with me was that final hospital scene where she walked through the door and her dad was there standing in the light. That one definitely stuck with me.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, so I want to get to the end, but first, because you brought this topic up, and like this is totally a its own podcast. I struggle with the conversation about should video games be fun, and the reason I struggle with it is because I can't decide if that's like a worthwhile conversation or if it's like reductive and boring.
It's reductive and boring.
Yeah, probably,
me.
right?
Yeah, like I think that video games, if they're so, I had a talk with Rand Miller, who is the creator of Myst a few years back, and he and I talked about like the state of video games for 2 or 3 hours, and he agreed with me on this point that video games are now where movies were in the 20s and 30s. Movies in the 20s and 30s had complex themes, but were ultimately about shocking you, awing you, making you go like, wow, I just spent money to go see an amazing extravaganza, right? And video games, especially the AAA space, it doesn't really apply too much as the indie space. The AAA space, I feel, is very often preoccupied with just giving you that baseline satisfaction with a lot of complexity. And we're seeing when a game tries to not be that, which is very much what I think The Last of Us tries not to do. I don't think The Last of Us is supposed to be fun at all times. You see that the fan base that you've cultivated for these games does not respond or react well to
Right.
you changing what they want a video game to be.
Right.
So, but yeah, I think if video games are to grow as an art form, if they're going to get more interesting, if we're going to have more diverse forms of what a game actually is, I think the idea of whether or not a game should be fun to play is a very, very, very minor conversation, unless we're talking about like a fighting game, in which case the mechanics are everything, right? It depends on the genre, but ultimately, I think that's a really fun conversation.
Yeah, I think it's part of what you said about like giving an audience what you've trained them to expect to want. But the other problem is, like I've been harping on this whole time, is just about the length and the time commitment. Like I want a highly emotional, engaging experience that's not necessarily fun the whole time. But if you have me for 25, 30 hours, I can't, culturally, societally, you can't have my attention for something devastating for 30 hours. Like
Right.
The Last of Us 2 is very fun, and it walks the line pretty well. But if you really want to explore the themes effectively that The Last of Us 2 is trying to explore, and like do a good job of getting deep into the stuff, you can't bake it into this 30-hour epic. Like that has to be a smaller experience, because I can't emotionally deal with that. I can't engage with it and care about it for that long. Movies are not that long, you know?
Right. When something is as long as this game is, the more the cracks in it, the more the split seams become apparent. Like The Last of Us 1 succeeded, I think, primarily because that was like what, an 11 or 12-hour game? It wasn't that long. This game, and like I don't remember a lot of the bad parts of that game. I didn't question a lot of the bad parts. When a game is this long, the world that I'm inhabiting, I start to notice things more of just like, hey, this whole thing between the Washington Liberation Front and the government really sure feels like some serious both sidesism. And I don't think that conflict would have been a focal point had the game been shorter. I like to harp back on one of my favorite games of last year, Blair Witch, a game that's like 3 to 5 hours long. You don't kill a single person in that game until the very end, in which it's a flashback, and you realize, oh, I was a soldier that killed an unarmed woman during wartime. And the game makes you sit with that choice. It shows you like 4 hours of horror and an hour of PTSD, and that's all you need. All you need is that short experience. I think The Last of Us Part 2 wants to capture that moment of shooting an unarmed person, but they want to keep making you shoot an unarmed person for 30 hours, metaphorically speaking.
Right.
And I think that story beat doesn't hit as well the more you do it.
Yeah, it's like we're not evolved enough to sit with that for that long.
We don't live in pods yet.
No, and we
don't
all
live in the Matrix pods yet.
It's all Twitter feeds and like short form entertainment. Like we're all so conditioned to only engage with stuff for a microsecond.
Right.
You know, it's like as much as I wish I could give myself to something, to a 30-hour Schindler's List, I can't.
I'm sorry, I don't want to roast any of our peers, but can we just like for 1 second, like what a bad take that was.
God, it's terrible. I saw
so
the
bad.
funniest thing today. I wish I could credit the person that said it, but it was this just badass action clip. By the way, we haven't talked about the game very much at all in this.
No, we haven't. It's good.
So just this, there's tons of these clips of just like Ellie being insane and doing stuff you had no idea she could do. Did you know you could jump off stuff and knife them as you're falling? I didn't know you could do that in this game. Did you know you could jump backwards and fall onto the ground and start shooting people from the ground?
Nope.
I did know that.
Okay.
That was later in the game that I figured that out. Like the very end.
So the funniest tweet I saw today was just this super badass clip of Ellie destroying a bunch of people, and then the comment was like, the funniest thing about that bad take about Schindler's List is that The Last of Us 2 actually is a pretty good John Wick movie.
It really felt like that critique of the game was invoking a piece of media surrounding the Holocaust to go, wow, the Holocaust was bad, and this game deals with bad things too. I have one brain cell.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was rough,
Totally.
Bad
sure.
take.
But there was so much of that in
Yeah,
embargo time. It was all like, you know, you might be tempted to binge The Last of Us 2, but treat it like a fine glass of scotch. It must be savory.
So stupid.
Like,
Well, now, on the movie front, like comparison, so it's hard for me to dislike a movie. Like it could be just the most hacky thing, and I'll be like, "That's all right."
I'm the same way.
I won't watch it again, but that was fine.
Yeah.
There's one movie, I think it was Sweet November, and I remember going to the theater to see that, and I don't remember who's in it. I think Keanu Reeves and Charlize Theron maybe, but I remember seeing it and being so pissed for watching that and leaving the movie after 2.5 hours. And I kept thinking about that as I got towards the end of The Last of Us 2, and I was trying super hard not to, but I mean, we'll get into this when we talk about the ending, but that was my movie take in terms of The Last of Us 2. It was surprising.
let's talk about the end. I think we're here now. Even though we never talked about like actually playing the game. Like the fighting.
Outside bar. This game feels really heavy in a way that AAA games usually do. Like it has that weightiness that I hate. But as somebody who loves survival horror games, they're my second favorite genre, this is a very good one of those, and that every single action you make seems deliberate. Every single limb you shoot on somebody feels like it has a different impact.
Yeah.
Everything you do to this world and the people in it is tangibly reflected in the heft of the mechanics, and I think that makes it a very satisfying game to play.
Yeah,
that's all I have to say about
the exciting moments are exciting and all that stuff.
There you go.
My single short take on the actual gameplay. I am not a very creative player. I find if you don't show me the things I can do, I usually don't find them. As much as I loved Breath of the Wild, like I didn't know all the cool things in that game until I saw someone else do it. So while I was playing this game, at a certain point, I stopped and I watched that first gameplay trailer, which is really beautifully put together. It's Ellie and Dena in a scene you don't see until the very end of the game, which is actually that night at the party where they share that first kiss, right? And then it cuts into gameplay, which is they change it in the actual game. But watching that sequence, I was like, oh, that's how you're supposed to play this game. Because the way I was playing the game was crawl around, try to take dudes out silently. As soon as I get spotted, hide in cover, and then just pick dudes off one at a time from that spot. And once I saw other people playing the game more effectively and cleverly and kinetically, just like constantly on the move, taking every opportunity, making better use of like the stun grenades and the fire and stuff, like that's when it started to really click. And even though I'm still seeing things I didn't know you could do, I think that the combat felt significantly more evolved than the first game, and it felt emergent in a way that was a big deal in the first game. Like I remember when they revealed like when you shot the gun and it dry fired, and then the enemies would go, "Oh, she's out of bullets," and then rush you. That blew my mind back then.
It's still really cool when that happens, honestly. It feels good.
So I feel like they did evolve on those concepts and make like these really crazy combat animations feel like gameplay. Because like the fighting is like half cutscenes, really.
Yeah.
Right.
But it all feels like it's gameplay.
Well, it's cool because the game allows you to kind of play to your own style. Like you can stealth around and shiv everyone you want, or you can just book it and hope that you make it to the next door. Like that's how I got away with not killing any dogs that I didn't have to kill, because I just refused to do it, which resulted in me dying a lot. But
I set them all on fire, Sam. I'm sorry.
My hope was to write a guide as to that you don't have to kill them, but that's not true. So
there's a point. What's really funny is I remember you mentioning you were writing that guide, and then there's the first time that there's a quick time event, dog tackle. I think it's in the aquarium. I was like, oh, Sam's probably really upset.
That was a bummer.
That was an important dog.
It was.
Yeah, it was. It was the important dog, the goodest boy. But no, like what I think speaks to this game's mechanical depth is that the way that I played Last of Us was I played half of it and my girlfriend played half of it, and we would trade off every like 2 or 3 hours and watch each other play. And when she would play, it would be the most like I have every resource available. I have the most ornate stealth plans. I have everything going. I'm gonna not kill anyone I don't have to. And when I played, I burned through all of those resources and I killed. Even if I was never detected, I made it a point to just murder the shit out of everybody that I could. And if I couldn't, they were all shooting behind me and I was running. And the game lets you get away with both approaches and several other more approaches. And I think that speaks to the pliability and depth of the mechanics.
Right.
Yeah. I'm the biggest immersive sim fan, probably on the team. And while obviously The Last of Us 2 is not an immersive sim, there's a lot of design direction that pulls from, games like Deus Ex and the idea of like approaching a large area or a big problem and tackling it the way you want. Even the way they do safe and safe codes, which people are goofing on, like that's straight up emergent sim stuff or immersive sim stuff.
It is, and I think what's interesting is we're seeing this because I also love emergent sims. I just don't like Prey. You're seeing that he's gone. But we're seeing those elements trickle into more mainstream experiences. For example, Shadow of the Tomb Raider was made by the entire Deus Ex Mankind Divided team, and Human Revolution team. And so that game had a lot of like the AAA chicanery that comes with playing a AAA video game, but it also had some straight up Deus Ex emergent sim stuff in it. I think that I think we're starting to see the AAA space play around with that a little more, which I'm all for.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. All right. We've been putting it off for too long. We got to talk about the end of this damn game.
Okay.
I just pulled my microphone straight out of the stand.
Oh.
Okay. Here we go. I don't want to say anything yet. Somebody else has to.
Sam, you go. Talk about the ending. Do it.
Explain, sum it up in just one. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
It's impossible, right?
Yeah, it really is. And it was one of the, it's there's so much going around in my head in terms of the ending that it's hard to really put into words.
Yeah.
It was good. Like, I appreciate everything that went into the ending. I hated it.
Okay.
I absolutely hated it, from having to go fisticuffs with Abby as Ellie. The decisions that Abby made to leave Dena and JJ, who clearly, like, when she denied Tommy, like, Dena went out and, chewed off Tommy's head, which I appreciated, because here's a woman who's protecting the woman that she loves, protecting her family, and then Abby just goes off and does her own thing. But yeah, man, it was a tough ending for me, I guess.
It's certainly not the ending that you want for characters that you love. I think that's fair to say.
But and like I said earlier, like, had I been able to choose who to play as at the end, since you were able to play as both throughout the entire game, I for sure would have gone as Abby.
Yeah. So like having that choice up front would have maybe helped alleviate a lot of the ending stress for you.
I think so. And I can't really foresee a different ending in terms of letting both of them go on with their lives. But still, like, I'm in Abby's corner in that regard.
I'll give my interpretation, but I guess first I want to say that, like, as much as people want to boil it all down to a salient point, or just for the sake of like shitting on it, I don't think that you can. I don't think that you can summarize exactly why and how the game ends the way that it does, and I think that it's a much stronger thematic and conversation piece, and that's what makes it good. Totally. Whether you like it or not, like, I don't think you're supposed to like it. Mm-hmm. I think that's okay. My interpretation of those final moments, first of all, I want to say like the slugfest, the tired, broken, dying, just laborious slugfest was maybe my favorite part of the game, because it wasn't like mechanically, it was very simple. It was just like dodge, punch, 2 buttons, and every hit on either side, like Abby hitting Ellie, Ellie hitting Abby, I felt every punch. As there's a moment where Ellie's on top of Abby and just doing the move or slowly pushing the knife in.
Yeah.
And you just hitting square, and I'm just like slowly hitting square, and like tears are running down my face. Like, I don't want to do any of this. They don't want to do any of this. We all, like me and Abby and Ellie, are all doing this out of some dark, twisted necessity.
Yes.
And it's so effective.
It is.
My interpretation then of because not everybody, but because people want to say it sucks because nobody dies, right? I think that's essentially it. Like they wanted to see Abby get killed, I guess,
because they missed the point of the game.
Because they missed the point of the game. So the way that I saw Ellie's on top of Abby, she's drowning her. Throughout the whole game, Ellie has seen Joel's dead, destroyed face, and that is what has given her the energy to keep fighting. And in the moment where she has won, it's over, Abby's effectively dead, drowned. She sees Joel alive. She sees her last moment with Joel, and to me, she sees that it doesn't stop. Just because, like, she sees that it's over and that Abby's dead, but that her pain doesn't go away, and that's why she lets Abby go. And I think that there's something to be said about Abby showing her mercy twice and letting her live, and Ellie showing that same mercy.
Yes.
I would not call it like a moment of redemption, but I think that it is appropriate. I think it makes sense, and I think that it was really effective in that way.
Totally.
Bello, how did you feel about it?
The ending of this game made me question my entire life trajectory.
Wow. Put that on the box, dude.
Like, despite all of my mixed feelings about the rest of the game, probably in my top 3 game endings of all time. First of all, the narrative and thematic heft of Ellie trying to drown somebody when she herself could not swim for most of her life is just like so salient. I love that.
For sure.
But the point where she doesn't kill Abby, to me, made me take a step back and look at how much my own stuff that I'd gone through in life dictated me. Was I doing things that were a result of my trauma, or was I doing something that was like wholly me? And so my whole life, I would do things in relationships, friendships in my life. I'd make choices and I would just go like, this is who I am. And this game made me go like, am I doing the things that I do because that's who I am, or am I doing it as a result of what I've gone through and what I was taught by my father growing up? Am I doing a learned behavior and I falling into a learned pattern, or am I making my own choices? And in this moment, in this ending of this game, you see Ellie realizing, to me, that she is literally just doing what Joel would do. And I think by sparing Abby, she just makes the decision to not do that. I think by sparing Abby, she sees Joel and she's like, I'm not him. I can make a different choice. I can end this. I can break this cycle. And I agree with you. I don't think it's redemptive, because like when I have addressed my own toxic behaviors that are a product of my upbringing, that doesn't mean I'm like suddenly a good person. It doesn't mean that suddenly undoes every bad thing I've ever done. And you see that in the ending when Ellie goes back to that farmhouse and Dena is just like gone. Just like, I'm done. And I've been in friendships like that. I've been in relationships like that, where it doesn't matter how much I have personally changed. What I have already done has impacted somebody so negatively that maybe they don't want to give me that chance to grow. And that's acceptable. That's fine. And I think that's what Ellie does here. I think that's what happens to Ellie here. You see her realize that she needs to stop being so, sadistic. But just because she realizes that she has a problem doesn't mean that she gets a happy ending. It doesn't mean that she suddenly gets a better life. gets her girlfriend, gets to raise a kid together. Acknowledging that you make mistakes doesn't make those mistakes go away. And I think that's what the point of this game is. And I think that's why I like the ending so much, in that it isn't happy. It just it's this broken woman realizing that she's broken. And it will take a ostensible third part for us to see if she grapples with that on its own terms, or if she crumbles under the weight of her own guilt. So yes, I love the ending of this game. It's one of my favorite endings to a game ever, and I think it's probably why my overall opinion of this game is positive, despite my conflict about it, because it is truly bleak. It is truly haunting, and it's when I connected with Ellie the most.
Yeah.
So yeah, I liked the ending. I thought it was beautiful. And also, yeah, that slugfest is awesome. Like it's painful to do, it's painful to participate in, but you know, that's kind of the point, right?
Right. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's
I like the ending. It's good.
it's also worth mentioning, like we're talking about that last scene, the actual true ending of the game, where she goes back and she sees all of the consequences. She's lost Dena, but she's also through losing those fingers lost her connection to Joel and her ability to play their song. And I thought that was like very effective, very powerful.
Yeah, that was great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, you can read her leaving the guitar behind a lot of different ways. I think you can read that as closure with Joel, maybe, or closure with her own rage. I don't know, but I think that's what makes it so good, is that you can't really sum it all up. I think I already said that, but
I'll say that my favorite part of the ending was that she went back to the empty house, and I applauded Dena for taking JJ, and getting her out of that situation. But I think what you said, Bella, about it being haunting, I would absolutely agree with that. You know, it was. I felt sick after I finished the game, which I mean I think it was intended, but I think that the ending, a lot of the problem that I had with this game overall was that it felt like it could have been released as episodic DLC, similar to Left Behind. But then that ending, I don't know if that would have worked to the level that it did. If it were just, released chapter by chapter. I think releasing it as the full game was probably, the best decision. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's my overall feeling about the game / ending.
Yeah, it takes a lot for a video game, especially a AAA one, to be something that lingers with you, to sticks with you, that makes, when the credits roll, you don't feel like you beat the game. You're like, oh, I finished it. You're sitting there like, oh, fuck, okay, well, I just drove this woman down a path of self-destruction. I feel great about myself. Time to go take a long bath. But yeah, I liked it. I think talking about the game has helped me parse a lot of my feelings about it. I think.
Me too. Yeah.
I think I'm a lot more positive on it than I was going into this conversation. It certainly has problems that we don't have time to get into, but like the overall package and what it succeeds at doing is worth the price of admission. Whether or not it's worth spending $60 on something that comes from a horrible culture of crunch is an entirely different conversation.
Yeah.
But on its own merits, the game itself is a very haunting, poetic, nuanced game with some great mechanics. And it definitely has one of my favorite endings that I've ever played in a game.
Yes, it is good. I expect it to have overwhelming success. It already seems like it's looking that way. I saw in the UK it was the fastest selling PS4 game of all time. But that also makes sense. As a console generation continues, more people have PlayStations, right? I hope that I just hope that we don't get more games like this. I hope that The Last of Us 3 isn't 45 hours long, and kills 60 developers because they can't deal with making the thing. Like that's, as much as I really appreciated this game and it is beautiful, and I hate that it exists.
Yeah, I think a basic crux point that I have, if I'm going to actually bring a good reader response theory into this, is it's very weird for a game to have poetic meditations on, working so hard until you break, doing something until you break, the violence inherent in that, and come from a company that literally does that to its own employees. And while that's a super complicated conversation to be having, I do think it's very strange that Neil Druckmann wants to make, and I guess the other writer, Haley Gross.
Yeah.
Thank you, Haley Gross. It's very weird that that's the point they want to make when the game that they have put their name on is complicit in a culture of violence when it comes to AAA game production. And I think that almost undercuts a lot of what it's trying to say, just on the strict basis of how it's made. There's no, the right answer here is obviously fucking change the way games are made. But there's not really a right way to talk about this game because it's such a nuanced issue.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, Eric. I love this game, but I hate that it exists and I hate how it was made.
Right. Yeah, because you can't even start that conversation without then like implicating capitalism.
Absolutely, which is a whole other thing.
Yeah, you have to go all the way with it.
But I'll get into it now.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So two last questions because we're coming up on 2 hours here.
Alrighty.
And I really appreciate you guys doing this with me. That was a lot of fun.
Of course.
First question: are you ever going to play it again, Sam?
I'll play it if Factions multiplayer comes.
Ooh, I love Factions.
Right.
Love Factions.
Yeah. Loved it.
Belly, you ever going to play this game again?
There's no word on that, so.
5-6 years down the line, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Probably, yeah.
Yeah. My heart says yes. I'm not a replay games kind of guy. Even my most favorite games ever. It's been part of our jobs. Like
it's part of our jobs.
Always on to the next one. But I'd like to think that I do want to play this game again. Second question: do we want a Last of Us 3?
No.
Sam says no.
Man, I didn't think we needed a second one. So we don't, but if it's good, then I'll play it. Let's put it that way. I don't think we need it. I think the game ends where it needs to end.
Yeah. Yeah, which you could have said about the first one for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And I will say that I don't want a Last of Us 3.
Yeah.
I don't. I always want something new. And I think franchise stuff is unhealthy for games as an art form and for like as a community.
But will you play it if it happens?
Yeah.
I will.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course I will.
Right. Exactly. It's a weird thing where like we can be very critical of this system, but ultimately, like because it's our jobs, we are kind of have to be complicit in.
Yeah.
Like it's messed up. Like when a new game launches, when they come out with a new AAA game, everyone's always like, "Oh, it's a new IP," and not like it's a new game. It's a new standalone experience. Oh, it's a new franchise. It's like, well, not everything has to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think there needs to be a third one personally. I know there will be, but I don't think there needs to be.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be. They always do.
Of course.
At least 3. So
yeah.
Okay.
And then they do a 4th Uncharted, and it's bad. Anyway.
Do you guys want to get together again and do this for Cyberpunk?
Yeah.
I'm down.
Yeah. Okay.
That's gonna be a fucking 12-hour conversation. I'm ready for it.
Yeah. Boy, that's a meal. I'm glad we have a little time in between. But
God, yes.
Thank you so much, Bella and Sam, and thank you so much for watching or listening. We want to do more stuff like this. Please check out the Pexing with the Legends podcast too. We do that every single week on Wednesday. Check out Sam's review for the game to read his full written thoughts. And just thegamer.com in general. Please support our website. We are really proud of the work that we do there. And until next time, we'll see you guys for Cyberpunk.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Ah.